Thank you, AP Choir. Today is truly my favorite assembly that we host at Appleton-Parkersburg High School. On behalf of our entire school, I welcome our students, staff members, community members, but more importantly, our veterans and their spouses who may be with us today. This time I would like to recognize one certain lady who's having a birthday, who's done a ton for our school through Dollars for Scholars, and also is very active within our Legion. Is Kate Humphrey here today? Kate, would you stand once just so we could recognize you? Elmer Davis once said, "This nation will remain the land of the free only as long as it is the home of the brave." See, young people, many of our guests here firmly believed in this, and they were the brave that made it so we can have our freedoms in what it is we enjoy doing. Not everyone here volunteered to go serve, but were drafted or were told, "You will serve our country." Something felt something deep within inside them. And even though many never had left Parkersburg area before, they were willing to go for 9 months of training, which was probably harder than anything they've done, and many sent across the oceans to a land they've never seen. Imagine young people, you 2 to 3 years older, right after graduation, being sent somewhere you've never went, holding a rifle, maybe asked to care for, going out to scout, to serve in a land that was a desert, where it was 118 degrees every single day in Iraq. Not everyone is cut out or willing to do this, but our brave visitors here today were willing to make that sacrifice. Never in my lifetime has America been more divided or had more issues. Political party divisiveness, religious differences, varying opinions on gun control, protesting by pro-athletes. But young people, I will tell you, this is not the first time in our country's history where we went down this road. See, I was not alive in the 60s, but some of our guests were. And they experienced these very same things that we've experienced. Before there was a Colin Kaepernick who decided to take a knee, there was 2 Olympic athletes named Tommy Smith and John Carlos who protested as well at the 1968 Olympics. They stood on a podium with a black glove, and as our anthem was played, they lowered their head and raised their fist. This was also an outrage. This will also spark much debate. And the reason we can have those debates, young people, is because what our veterans were willing to do for us. In the 60s, our country was filled with hate, with unrest, with race riots, with protest. There was a thing called Woodstock, which was a free-for-all. And there was a war called Vietnam, in which many of our country did not agree with. And they didn't peacefully stand by, but were very loud and had demonstrations and protests, and they would yell at our troops as they were leaving, not all who had volunteered to go, but were fulfilling their duties. There are varying opinions, without a doubt. Not only did these young men go face a jungle and fight in a war that had never been fought before with guerrilla combat, but I think the worst part was when they returned home. Today, I believe America does an unbelievable job of recognizing and thanking our troops for what it is they have done, for their sacrifice away from their families, from their communities, from their loved ones. Unfortunately, those who are here with us today did not all experience that. And when they came back home, they were welcomed home not to parades and thank yous, but were spit on, called killers, described as a disgrace. Young people, our world today and our society and our culture is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I do believe we're better. Rarely do you see people who fight for religious freedoms, gun control, freedom of speech, or political divisiveness, and they go serve their country. When they come home, they're welcome as the heroes that they are. As George Santayana stated, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And young people, I hope your generation is even better than mine, that you continue to honor and recognize those people who are willing to serve, of which some gave the ultimate sacrifice. You see, when you go to war, young people, and I never experienced this, I can only speak from what I've watched and seen on TV and through different interviews I've listened to. But I do know this: when your eyes see something, you can't unsee something. When you smell something, you can't unsmell that. And for many people who have created the opportunities and freedoms we have, they experience things we could never imagine. And they did it so we could have all those rights and liberties that we take for granted at times daily. My father-in-law, Jerry Junker, was the closest veteran that I was ever to. He was a Parkersburg grad, and shortly after graduation, he was off to boot camp before going to Vietnam, where he served in recon. Basically, his job was to go get ammunition to those out fighting, to sneak in, to scout some different things out. I can honestly tell you, I only heard my father-in-law one time talk about Vietnam, and it was probably for one total minute. When he came home, he was not well received. He experienced many of those things, and I don't know this because he told me, but I'm guessing by his reaction. You see, I'm extremely proud to be the son-in-law of Jerry Junker, who fought in Vietnam. But Jerry Junker was not overly proud of how he was received. When veterans were asked to stand, there was times he didn't do it. And one time I did hear him mumble, "You didn't appreciate me when I came home. I'm not certain I can accept it at this point." And when you see some of those things and you fight those fights and you have those battles, I don't know what that's like. I can't imagine, but I do know this: I'm extremely grateful and proud of what my father-in-law was willing to do for our country, for my freedoms. Young people, our country is not perfect, but let us learn from the mistakes of our past. Let us appreciate the brave who served and went before us, that we can have our liberties, that we can have our thoughts, that we're free to express what it is we believe in. Without those brave folks who've served us, we would not be the United States of America, with our rights, with our liberties. And to this, we thank those who are here today, our heroes, our brave, and those who have served. So to our veterans, we all thank you for what you've done for us. At this time, it is my pleasure to welcome Miss Sydney Schneiderman to the stage.
Ever since I was a child, I've understood that veterans were special people. Growing up, one of my biggest role models was a veteran. His name was Ivan Harkin, my great-grandfather. He served in World War II in the Navy. Although he suddenly passed in 2012, I will always remember the stories he told me after school as I sat at his countertop eating cookies and drinking Dr. Pepper. One example is the story of when he steered the ship he was stationed on away from a mine underwater and saved everyone on board. He taught me many things, but some of the most important things being love God, love your family, and love your country. He did this by putting these things above all else in his life, day in and day out. One example includes every time the national anthem was played, he stood proudly with his hand over his heart. The year after his passing, I got to go to Washington, D.C. with AP to D.C. And I'd have to agree with my grandpa that this was one of the most beautiful and transforming places he's ever visited. Being in Washington, D.C., you truly understand how great America is and how it is so very important to be grateful for the rights we have and how we must honor those who fought for those rights. Veterans are all role models. Whether drafted or volunteered, veterans did one of the most selfless things that anyone can do. They protected and still protect one of the most valuable things that us as Americans possess. As a student body, we owe all the respect we can muster to the veterans sitting in this auditorium today and to the veterans nationwide. The sacrifices they've made in their lives so you can live yours freely is unimaginable. They went out to fight for their rights, their community's rights, and the rights of the current 323.1 million Americans alive today. Without their sacrifices, who knows where we would be right now. In closing, I'd like to quote some of the words from a famous American anthem written by Lee Greenwald. "And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died to give that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA." Thank you. Avery Everts will now read a poem about our flag.
I am your flag, author unknown. I am your flag. I was born on June 14th, 1777. I am more than just cloth shaped into a design. I am the refuge of the world's oppressed people. I am the silent sentinel of freedom. I am the emblem of the greatest sovereign nation on earth. I am the inspiration for which American patriots gave their lives and fortunes. I have led your sons into battle from Valley Forge to bloody swamps of Vietnam. I walk in silence with each of your honored dead to their final resting place beneath the silent white crosses, row upon row. I have flown through peace and war, strife and prosperity, and amidst it all, I have been respected. My red stripes symbolize the blood spilled in defense of this glorious nation. My white stripes signify the burning tears shed by Americans who lost their sons. My blue field is indicative of God's heaven under which I fly. My stars, clustered together, unify 50 states as one for God and country. Old Glory is my nickname, and proudly I wave on high. Honor me, respect me, defend me with your lives and your fortunes. Never let my enemies tear me down from my lofty position, lest I never return. Keep alight the fires of patriotism. Strive earnestly for the spirit of democracy. Worship eternal God and keep his commandments, and I shall remain the bulwark of peace and freedom for all mankind. I am your flag. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which I stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
His MRE lay beside him, but hunger evaded him. The shower he took earlier under a hose in a plywood box had evaporated into the dry heat, just as most of his resolve did. Sitting out on the beaten-down tarmac of the airfield in Iraq, just days after war had been declared and Desert Storm came to life, he held a pen to a flimsy piece of yellowed paper and wrote his wife a letter. Dear Courtney, of all the places in this world I've been, this is the least of them. It took us a week to get showers set up. The hangar we're in has huge holes all over, and we can't drink the water yet. For now, I'm sitting out here next to one of the many Blackhawks. The wind is picking up, throwing sand in my face and mouth, but I'm thinking of you. And suddenly, it's not that bad. Take care of Amanda, take care of yourself. I'll be home soon. Love, James. 3 weeks and 2 minute-to-count flights over Iraq's airspace, limited communication, and only one phone call. A letter came. He was sitting, this time, up on top of a tin building. The sky was growing dark, the winds were calming just enough, and the sounds of bombing in the distance seemed fainter than they had before. Carefully, as if to savor the moment, he opened the letter. Dear James, I pray for you every morning and every night, and as I lay here with Amanda, knowing our second child is soon to be born, I pray to God that you come home safe to see us. I can't even begin to imagine what you're enduring, and my heart breaks that you are going through this. But as your wife, I am more proud of you than you will ever know. You are my hero. You are our children's hero. You are the man I dreamt of all my life. I'm taking care of things. Don't worry. And please come home soon. Love, Courtney. James came home in 1996, just before his son, Brandon, was born. It has been a long tour with the Marine Corps, but the soldiers were proud of the work they'd done, and their families were grateful for those men and women who came home safely. And for those who gave their lives, they mourned. In life, it went on. A soldier's life. A life in which the tragedy of war is never far from the mind. And the idea that at any moment you could be called to fight sits like a heavy weight on the hearts of those who choose to go willingly and those who don't are conflicted with the reality of their next step in life not being their own choice. It is a life that says you are called to bravery, called to action, called to serve even if those whom you serve do not appreciate or agree with it. It is getting up each day, donning that uniform, and being proud to be an American. It's the wife at home who cries herself to sleep at night, but wakes up to a new day, determined to be strong for her soldier. It's a child who cannot understand the absence of her father, whose constant questions challenge a mother to remind herself that this is not in vain. It was a cold October day when the phone call came. It was the year 2000. James was now Iowa Army National Guard, and it was his time, again, to go. That day, he walked away and left behind his wife of 5 years, his 5-year-old daughter, his 3-year-old son, and a one-year-old baby girl. The internet had come into play since his last deployment, and they promised to keep in touch with email and AOL Messenger. This gave Courtney hope. 3 months in, however, security breaches had caused the military to shut down all internet communication, and they had to resort once more to writing letters. Dear Courtney, James wrote from Iraq in a tiny tin hut made to fit 10 soldiers. I don't question what I do. I'm obedient to this cause, but it's days like today that I really miss you guys. I wonder what I'm not seeing. Amanda starting kindergarten, Brandon learning to ride his bike without training wheels, and Sam learning to talk. Does she ask about me? I hope she does. I hope that you're okay. Please be strong for us. I know you can. I love you. Love, James. Dear James, Sam asks about you all the time. You don't need to worry about that. In fact, some days I feel like you're the favorite parent because all they do is ask for you. I'm taking lots of pictures, I promise. You are here with us in our hearts and in our spirits. And please know that you are loved. No matter what we go through it together. Love, Courtney. And James came home, and life was good. And his ability to reintegrate into the family was seamless, and they were whole again. The gaps that a military family suffers are gaps that can never be replaced. Times of critical moments, graduations, weddings, baptisms, surgeries, the first step, the first word. There are hundreds of moments lost to war. Picking up the pieces, finding a way to overcome what can't be, takes courage and strength and tenacity. When the phone rang in 2007, Courtney didn't think much about it until she heard James say, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir." She immediately fell to the floor, collapsed, and overcome with sobs. "Not again, not again." Sometimes being strong is just not possible. They said their goodbyes this time in the driveway. Amanda was 12, Brandon was 10, and Sam was 8. They'd been married for 12 years, and this would be their third deployment. Late one night, after 6 months of James's absence, Courtney typed into Yahoo Messenger to her husband on the other side of the world, "I can't do this." James typed back, "You can. Please, please, you can." Courtney attempted suicide that night while her children lay sleeping upstairs. Had it not been for James calling a friend from Iraq in the middle of the night, she would not have lived. James was called home from Iraq via the Red Cross. His tour would end short. Courtney was in dire need of help. Sometimes strong is ugly and it's hard. And sometimes we do it behind closed doors. But then other times, it's not enough just to pretend you're strong. Military wives and children and families know this all too well. The pain and loss felt coupled with the agony of life without their loved one is so great that it can, without help and support, swallow you whole, just as it had Courtney. As the year progressed, Courtney received the help that she needed to heal herself. As it turned out, she suffered from bipolar disorder. With counseling, medication, and a lot of help, she began to come out of the dark. And they went on, and life was so good. They were eating dinner, just Courtney, James, and Sam one evening, talking about their day and reminiscing the joys and successes when the phone rang. "Yes, sir. Yes, sir." Courtney fell to the floor, James and Sam immediately running to her, lowering themselves down, lifting her to her feet. As the tears fell, they clung to one another. James lovingly placed his hands on Courtney's face. "You can do this. We can do this. We can all be strong and we're going to get through this. Promise me you can do this." As if being given a second chance straight from God himself, Courtney's shoulders went back, her head held high, and she resolved herself. "James, I love you and we can do this. Together we can do this." James left for Kuwait in the summer of 2012. Sam and Courtney kissed him goodbye at the airport and walked away hand in hand, together. Courtney, now a veteran of deployments, determined to prove to her husband and her children that she had what it took to be a good military wife. 7 months in, "Dear Courtney," he wrote in an email, "I'm so proud of you and so grateful for you and so in awe of you. You've done this deployment with sheer guts and determination, and this in turn has allowed me to do my job and to do it well. Thank you. Thank you for loving me this much. Love, James." Dear James, I've learned to reach out and get support when it's needed instead of trying to do it by myself. I've learned it takes a village to get through a deployment, and that it's not weak to ask for help. I've learned how much I adore you and love you, so much so that I want more than anything to be on your team. I want you to lean on me like I leaned on you. Together, this deployment will make us stronger than ever before. Love, Courtney. And it did, and it was good, and James came home. Reintegration was difficult this time, and James felt unsure of his place in the family for the first time ever. It took weeks before he would talk, days upon days of his silence. As a family, the children and Courtney prayed for him, were patient with him, and loved him through this time of doubt. Eventually, with enough prayer and love, James finally released his tour of duty and settled back into the arms of his loved ones. It wasn't until this last spring that I found the letters between my mom and dad during their deployments. And today, as I told you my story, well, my dad is currently serving a year-long deployment overseas again, I want this to be a love letter to you. May it serve to remind you that you do not walk alone. The terror of battle, the agony of missing loved ones, the sacrifices you made, and the life you created since that time are worthy of our lives being lived as love letters to you. Dear veterans, thank you. That which you have given for me is not lost, but is received with the utmost highest regard. For every night I say a prayer, not just for my father, but for you, that you might know and feel my love. I understand your sacrifice, I know the weight it carries, and I love you for having given it for me. May you be rich with love, peace, and joy. And may all of the days of your lives be the evidence of your willing and able hearts to give so very freely for me. God bless you. I love you. Love, Sam Fry.
Thank you, Sam. That was great, as always. Okay, we will now be calling the roll of veterans. When your name and branch are called, if you could please rise. Roger Timmer, Air Force.
Howard Hansen, Air Force.
Vernon Bierman, Army.
Kelly Etjen, Army.
Charles Eachin, Army.
Paul Hahn, Army.
Delbert Hoosman, Army.
Dave Mulder, Army.
Bob Navins, Army.
Paul Weber, Army.
Herman Luring, Army.
Edward Behrens, Army.
Joe Walbom, Army.
Clarence Karstens, Army.
Ronald Broquet, Army.
Burdette Anderson, Army.
Delbert Cockworth, Army.
Irvin Hahn, Army.
Dwayne Anderson, Army.
Alan Meyer, Army.
Kenny Johnson, Army.
David Goldagger, Army.
Marvin Ferding, Marines.
Russell Alberts, Marines.
Miles Humphrey, Marines.
Jim Wilmer, National Guard.
Joel Buss, Navy.
And Rich Humphrey, Navy.
Thank you.
The band is now going to play the Armed Forces Salute. So if you yourself served in a certain branch, or if you know somebody, anybody else who isn't a veteran, if you know somebody that served in that branch, please stand when that branch song is played. Army. Coast Guard. Marines. Air Force. Navy.
Well, that will conclude our program. At this time, I would just like to thank the AP Choir and the AP Band for their involvement and for what they do. Also, a special thanks to Ms. Shipper and Ms. Sigelski, along with the AP Honor Society, for putting together such a great program. Sam, thank you for coming back as AP alum. As we know, we wouldn't have to do that, but I know what this means to you, and it's special to have you here with us and to share your thoughts. And then finally, to our veterans, we thank you. Obviously, without you, there's no assembly, and we don't forget that. Young people, I appreciate your efforts, your respect today for this. At this time, students, you'll be dismissed. You'll head to second hour class. We'll have roughly 40-minute classes. Teachers, I'll shoot you a quick email when I get back to my office to let you know exactly when we'll go to third. We're going to split the time between second and third hour, and then we'll be back on track starting with lunch for fourth period. So all students at this time, please be dismissed. Veterans, if you'll just wait 1 minute, I have further instructions for you.